I know I'm late, but just bear with me. My love for movies is, I would say, second place to my love for video games. And quite recently, as I've discussed in one of my previous videos, we have been getting nothing but remakes and sequels. Well, with this newest addition to one of my top 10 films of all time comes a film produced by Michael B. Jordan, starring Michael B. Jordan, known as Sinners. I don't even know where to start with Sinners, but first, let me preface with spoiler warning. Okay? Wee woo, wee woo! Wake up, wake up! I'm going to be talking about spoilers for the movie Sinners. Okay, so the premise of Sinners, from at least what I saw from the trailers or everything going into it, was not much. Let me be honest. I didn't quite know what to expect from the film from just the trailers and the promotional media put out. However, once I got to watching Sinners and actually really started watching it, because damn is it good, I slowly realized that although it may be a vampire film, something that's been done hundreds of times, it's a vampire film with its own twist. Okay. So the movie kind of follows the Smokestack twins, Smoke and Stack. They're kind of these small town gangsters that moved to Chicago to make it big. However, the movie focuses on them returning to Chicago. They want to open up this juke jive club, whatever they call it in the film. I'm having trouble remembering currently, but they open up their own nightclub. Basically, it was a nightclub that the Smokestack twins wanted to run, and with their name and I guess prodigy throughout the town, people know them for better or for worse. They chose their hometown to start this club. So the first half of the movie kind of just sets up and is introducing all of the characters, kind of getting you a good feel for everything that is happening. The movie introduces another main role that you kind of don't expect to have as big as a part as he does, but Preacher Boy Sammy. Preacher Boy Sammy is their cousin, who is the son of a preacher boy, and he plays music. Early on in the film, Preacher Boy's dad talks to him and says, "The devil will come after you for your music." So, initially, when I first heard them talk about that, when I first heard him say that, I kind of just got the feeling, that it's, son leaving dad, leaving the family business, showing interest in something else, making it, just kind of like a secondary piece of information, something I didn't deem important. But when I tell you by the end of the film, quite literally, the devil himself comes for Sammy Boy Preacher, or Preacher Boy Sammy. Let me clear the cobwebs from my brain, because Sammy Boy Preacher is not his name. As much as I said it confidently, the devil does quite literally come for him and his music. The devil wants to use Preacher Boy Sammy's music as a sort of like... Well, hold on. Before I break that down, let me break down a whole nother scene. So, Preacher Boy Sammy and I believe Stack are driving to wherever they're going. I think they're collecting band members at this point. And Preacher Boy Sammy pulls out a guitar and starts playing, And at first, it's that classic blues. It's that, boom, 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 and then he starts singing. And when he starts singing is the first time you realize that he's not an ordinary blues player. He actually might have something going for him. So they collect their musicians. They open the club. They are kind of just, for the first half of the movie, really focused on getting this club open. And then you get your first shot of, in the movie, they describe it as a haint for the first time, but you soon to get known that they are vampires indeed. You get the first view of, I guess, the main vampire at the current time, and about halfway through, he's the only vampire. He makes a abrupt landing and starts running towards this royal house, begging and pleading. The Indians, they beat me up. They took my wife, yada, yada, yada. And then he pulls out a little bit of gold. And to anyone, that little bit of gold could carry them a long way in that time. So, of course, the people invite him in, and then he turns them into vampires. But back to Preacher Boy Sammy, because he is quite literally my favorite character in the movie. And it's quite literally for only one scene. I thought I would leave the film liking Stack, as my favorite character. He's not necessarily a main character, but he is the main character. It kind of does a good job on focusing on all of the characters for the most part. But the scene that impressed me the most was when Preacher Boy Sammy was performing at this club, and it really starts to break down the music, the history of music, why music feels good, the present, past, and future of music. It shows the connection through time, right? It goes from a futuristic guitar player to early tribal musics with, the animal skin drums and things of that nature. It truly breaks it down, and as somebody who has a deep connection to music, it truly felt like for the first time in Hollywood media or just American movie culture, the feelings and the thoughts associated with music, it kind of brought it into a visible understanding, right? It kind of made you realize how truly important music is. So as the camera's panning through the room and it's showing all these different generations of music, and Sammy Boy's still just he's going crazy, and it's truly a cinematic shot. And I mean, it's not the only one the movie holds. There's at one point where they start fighting, and the movie goes from black bars, and it opens up to show that it's going to be more of a thrilling action shot, and then they start fighting the vampires. Overall, there weren't many complaints to the movie. I would have kind of liked them to deep dive into Delta Slim a little bit more. He seemed to have had a bigger role than they necessarily alluded to. They kind of left a lot up for question on exactly what happened with Delta Slim, but he's not necessarily a main character, so that doesn't matter as much. But I kind of would have liked to see his character develop more. I kind of would have liked them to go deeper into the vampires' origins, maybe, or even just more of their story and how they came to be, what happened with them, why his obsession with music. He wants Preacher Boy Sammy to turn to his side so that he can use that wonderful voice and bring together all of the people, bring together the generations and the lost souls and bring them all together so they're one big happy group. I kind of would have liked him, like I said, to delve into Delta Slim's character and more on the vampires. But overall, I genuinely can't complain about this film. It was, at first, initially, I thought it would be a little bit long, standing at 138 minutes, which is an hour and 2 hours and 18-ish minutes, something crazy like that. I thought it was a little long at first, I'm not going to lie to you. And then I realized they used every second of that movie correctly. They used it to a point that not a single time on screen did I feel like they weren't doing something important. They weren't setting something up or explaining something or just letting something happen at the film. It genuinely kept me interested the entire time. And for that, I genuinely give it a round of applause. There hasn't been too many new movies nowadays that allow me to get this feeling of completion. They Sure, as a movie buff, I had my complaints. As somebody who really enjoys cinematography and the whole movie industry, I had my complaints. I really did. But at the end of the day, I have to give the film like a solid 8.5, 9 out of 10, which is pretty high on my scale. There are not many movies that make it past a 7 or a 7.5. So for a film to have made it to the 8s and even an early 9, that is promising. Like I said, for a full perfect 10, it has to be everything I wanted. There were a couple times where I felt, like I mentioned, the story felt a little short. I'm not going to go into everything, but you can nitpick it as much as you want. And, for me, that deducts a 1.5 at most. But other than that, like I mentioned, fantastic film. Highly recommend it. If you haven't seen it, it's out on HBO Max as of today. Also, happy July 4th, Independence Day. Whatever you're celebrating today, even if you're not celebrating, happy July 4th. Get used to it. It's awesome. It's a good holiday. But yeah, other than that, thank you for sitting down with me tonight. As always, this has been The Kevin Show. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.